Joji is a film about power and power structures. It's also a film about how power shifts and the balance tips and what people are willing to do to tip that balance in their favor. Now, Kuttappan Panachel, the oldest in the Panachel house, is at the very top of this power structure. Our main character Joji, however, is closer to the very bottom. Now, the filmmaking has made this structure of power and its inflexibility very clear through its first act. Almost everyone in the house, excluding perhaps the oldest son Jomon, see Kuttappan with a mix of fear and respect, more than they see him with love. This sentiment isn't unfounded. Kuttappan rules with an iron fist. But if there's anything history teaches us, you succeed as a ruler only if you rule fairly or incredibly harshly. Or at least give the impression that you are fair while being brutal off camera. Like many things, tyranny lies on a spectrum. If I had to, I'd put Kuttappan Panachel somewhere in the middle. The least tyrannical and the most tyrannical are also the most stable. That in-between area where you're somewhat fair opens you up to criticism or ridicule. If you are somewhat harsh, although you eliminate the possibility of ridicule, by your own citizens at least, it opens you up to harsher criticism by people who have had enough and are by now fearless enough to decide that it's time they did something about being subjugated. Kuttappan Panachel doesn't fit into any of these categories exactly. Not all his quote-unquote subjects look at him the same way. Jomon, for example, doesn't feel as deeply oppressed as the rest of the family does. It could be because he's confident enough to stand up to authority when he feels like he needs to take back control. Now, the other members of the family lack this conviction. Like I mentioned previously, I'm taking the liberty of putting Panachel in the in-between area. He was harsh to the point where he was terrifying to the rest of the family, but once there was a weakness in him someone like Joji could exploit, he was vulnerable to the kind of usurpation not uncommon in the history of the world. But in a story about revolution, there's as much to talk about the usurper as there is the usurpee. It's apt that the marketing of this movie called it an adaptation of Shakespeare's The Scottish Play, otherwise also known as Macbeth. At first, I thought it was a disservice to the originality of this plot because there's really no plot-related points that these two stories share. They're about different types of people in totally different circumstances in totally different parts of the world.
മാക്ബത്തിന്റെ പ്ലോട്ട് നമ്മൾ ഒരു തരത്തിലും ഉപയോഗിച്ചിട്ടില്ല. ഇപ്പം മാക്ബത്ത് നാടകം കാണുമ്പം എനിക്ക് കിട്ടുന്ന ഒരു അനുഭവം, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മാക്ബത്ത് നാടകം വായിച്ചപ്പോൾ എനിക്ക് കിട്ടിയൊരു അനുഭവം ഒരു ഇൻഡിപെൻഡൻ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ളൊരു സിനിമയിലൂടെ ഉണ്ടാക്കാൻ പറ്റുമോ എന്നുള്ളൊരു ശ്രമമാണ് ശരിക്കും ചോദിച്ചത്. അങ്ങനെയാണ് ഇത് ശരിക്കും എക്സ്പെരിമെൻ്റൽ ആണെന്നാണ്. അല്ല, അങ്ങനെ നോക്കുമ്പോൾ ഞാൻ അതിനെ അങ്ങനെയാണ് കാണുന്നത്. മാക്ബത്ത് പറയുന്ന എല്ലാം പറയുന്നുണ്ടോ, ആ പ്ലോട്ടിൻ്റെ യാതൊരു ഏരിയകളും ഒന്നും, അത് പറയുന്ന ആശയത്തിൻ്റെ അടുത്തേക്ക് നിൽക്കാനാണ് സിനിമ എപ്പോഴും ശ്രമിച്ചത്.
Macbeth is about an honorable man becoming dishonorable. A central theme many different stories borrow, in varying degrees and in varying arcs. Could you make the argument that Macbeth was doomed even before his transformation because his doom was prophesized? Sure, but we're entering the realm of free will and determinism here, so let's leave that cat in the bag. In Joji, the closest allegory to Macbeth is Joji himself, although once he becomes king, we do see elements of Kuttappan Panachel in Macbeth as well. Lady Macbeth is typically associated with Binsi. Everyone's already talked about this and broken this relationship down to the core, so I won't linger on these characteristic similarities. Instead, I want to examine what director Dileesh Pothan does to present this dynamic to the audience. In one early scene, watch how Binsi convinces Joji that he has the freedom to take control in an uncertain situation.
ബിൻസി വായുവിന് നല്ലൊരു ഡീൽ തോന്നുന്നു.
ആഹാ ഓളടിച്ചല്ലോ.
സന്തോഷിക്കാറായിട്ടില്ല. ആ പടുതയുടെ താഴെ നിർത്തി അവനൊരു ഗുമ്മില്ലെന്ന ബ്രോക്കർ പറഞ്ഞു. മുറ്റത്തോട്ട് ഇറക്കി നിർത്തിയിരുന്നേ നല്ല റോയൽ ഫീലാ. ഇങ്ങോട്ട് കയറ്റിയാൽ മുട്ടുകാർ തല്ലി പിടിക്കുന്ന കട്ടപ്പ പറഞ്ഞിരിക്കുന്നത്. അല്ലേ ഇതിപ്പോൾ ഒരു സീനല്ല. ജോമോൻ സെറ്റായിട്ട് ജസ്റ്റ് ഒന്ന് പറഞ്ഞേക്കാം.
ജോജി ജോജിയെ നിന്നെ കൂടെ വീടല്ലേടാ ആരോട് ചോദിക്കാനാ? നീ എത്തിയും കേട്ടണം.
It's a trivial matter in this example where Joji wants to bring their horse to the front yard for a photo shoot, but this scene and a few others illustrate very effectively just how far down the food chain Joji sees himself. Binsi's little nudge to do whatever you want is the first clear example in the film of the Lady Macbeth characteristic we see. People often talk about the climax as being the most exciting part of a movie, and while that's certainly true for many films, establishment of themes and escalation of tension are just as important, if not more, to hook the audience into feeling just as involved in the movie from beginning to end. Every act is its own mini-movie, with some new ideas being established, rising tension, and the climax. In the first act, there's a whole lot more establishment than anything else, but scenes like this one, for example, are engaging because the tension is palpable. It's still generally light-hearted, so the camera maintains a minimum distance. Notice how it starts off really wide and then gets closer in as characters reveal their honesty a little more.
ഒരു കുറ്റി ഗ്യാസ് കത്തി തീർന്നാലും നമ്മുടെ ഈ പരിപ്പ് വേഗം പോകുന്നില്ല ജോജി.
എൻ്റെ പൊന്നു ബിൻസി കട്ട മരുന്നിൻ്റെ പുറത്താണ് നിൽക്കുന്നത്. വലിയ താമസമില്ല. ടേക്ക് ഇറ്റ് ഈസി.
നല്ല കാലം മുഴുവൻ നിനക്കൊക്കെ ഈ സ്ലാബിൻ്റെ പുറത്തിരുന്ന് കഴിക്കാനാടാ ബുദ്ധി.
The pot on the fireplace next to Binsi serves as a symbol that their plan is still being cooked, while also raging with the same sort of heat and anger that she is feeling at this moment. Joji is still keeping this light-hearted. His inciting incident hasn't happened just yet. The shot then goes back out wide and Joji leaves, escaping into his own little world, while Binsi stays in hers, further revealing the separation between these characters. Everyone in this family is alone, and it's not just the moments of dialogue and interaction that engage the audience. It's the quiet moments of introspection afterwards where we're forced to stay with these characters and feel what they're feeling, where Pothan's directing stands out. Politics is a battle royale where instead of soldiers killing each other with guns, senators and politicians fight each other with words and ideologies to send other people to kill each other with guns. Sure, there's the occasional co-op that you need to survive sometimes, but make no mistake, Parliament is just as, if not more, cutthroat than Fortnite. When you're done with one match, you come back and keep playing again and again. Only difference is that parliaments and governments have been around for much longer than Fortnite or PUBG or FAUG, whatever. I don't play these games, so I don't care if I forget to mention your favorite. Point is, when the players go too far, when it literally gets cutthroat, you get Macbeth and Joji. Sure, the roles are swapped around and the risks and rewards are very different, but the allure of more power, a better place in life, and a victory royale are the same for almost all people. Every TV soap opera your grandma watches has these exact themes. All Dileesh Pothan did differently was use the language of cinema to tell his version of a story as old as the human race itself.